3 new laws in Communist China. Commentary. With minimal debate, the fourth session of the 14th National People's Congress, China's rubber-stamp legislature, passed 3 draft laws before the session's closing on March 12. These included a draft environmental code, a draft bill on promoting ethnic unity and progress, and another on national development planning. Let us examine each of the 3 new laws. The Ecological and Environmental Code. The NPC Environmental and Resources Committee began drafting the code in 2023 to consolidate a relatively large body of pre-existing environmental law. The code's 1,188 articles integrate 10 existing laws, including the Foundational Environmental Protection Law, into a single document, ranking second only to the Chinese Constitution in legal effect. Its 5 chapters cover general provisions, pollution prevention and control, ecological protection, green and low-carbon development, and legal liability. The CCP Central Committee framed the compilation as a major decision carrying profound and far-reaching significance for advancing the Beautiful China initiative and promoting harmony between humanity and nature. Problems with execution. Despite its genuine legal ambition, the Environmental Code faces serious structural constraints under CCP governance. First, the law does not create genuinely independent enforcement. Supervision and management of national environmental protection sits with the Ministry of Ecology and Environment under the State Council, and supervision of natural resources sits with the Ministry of Natural Resources, both ultimately subordinate to the party's political priorities. Environmental inspectors who have exposed violations at state-owned enterprises or local government pet projects have most likely faced career consequences rather than rewards. Second, the law's climate provisions remain aspirational without binding mechanisms. The chapter on climate change establishes principles rather than enforceable obligations, reflecting the fact that China's carbon peaking commitment and neutrality commitment remain heavily dependent on the party's continued political will rather than legal compulsion. Local officials who face GDP growth targets alongside environmental targets have historically prioritized growth. Third, the extended statute of limitations for violations is meaningless if local prosecutors and courts remain unwilling to pursue cases against well-connected enterprises or local governments. The law on promoting ethnic unity and progress. The law is designed to codify CCP leader Xi Jinping's new orthodoxy for governing China's ethnic minorities, a doctrine known as important thinking on improving and strengthening ethnic work, reflecting the so-called second-generation ethnic policies promoted by several prominent Chinese scholars. This new assimilationist approach aims to reinforce citizens' sense of belonging to a unified country under the CCP, while also suppressing expressions of other identities that the party considers competing. In other words, cultural genocide by another name. The law declares a sense of community for the Chinese nation to be the foundation of ethnic unity. It mobilizes the whole of government and society to achieve assimilationist goals, imposing general obligations on a wide range of public and private actors, including public employees, mass organizations, enterprises, public service institutions, industry groups, religious institutions, neighborhood committees, and the military. On language, Article 15 mandates Mandarin to be taught to all children before kindergarten and throughout compulsory education through high school, essentially stating that minority languages cannot be the primary language of instruction nationwide. The law also asserts extraterritorial jurisdiction over foreign organizations or individuals who commit acts targeting the PRC that undermine ethnic unity and progress or create ethnic division. It also broadly requires media, internet service providers, and families to promote the party's ethnic policy. Parents are reminded of their duty to provide lawful family education and are prohibited from instilling in minors ideas detrimental to ethnic unity and progress. The emphasis on the Sinicization of religion, as highlighted by Xi during his visits to Xinjiang, underscores the broader goal of aligning all religious practices with state-sanctioned Chinese characteristics. Chinese regime spokespeople framed the law as bringing development and prosperity to minority areas. criticism from outside China was pointed. Ethnic Uyghurs, a Muslim minority, have been the target of a long-term campaign of detention and later incarceration by Communist China. While the short-term internment camps were said to be closed in 2019, thousands ended up in prison, where experts said they were targeted for their identity rather than actual crimes. Problems with execution. The problems do not relate to weak enforcement, quite the contrary. The CCP has demonstrated for years that it can and does enforce assimilationist policies with considerable coercive force. The deeper tensions are: first, the law is likely to generate exactly the resistance it officially aims to prevent. In 2020, when Mongolian language textbooks were replaced with Chinese ones in Inner Mongolia, the policy change led to massive protests, an immediate crackdown, and later re-education campaigns. Legally mandating Mandarin-only instruction is likely to harden ethnic identities rather than dissolve them, particularly among communities with strong linguistic and religious traditions. Second, the extraterritorial jurisdiction clause is essentially unenforceable against foreign nationals and organizations in democratic countries, but it creates a chilling effect on diaspora communities and foreign non-governmental organizations, journalists, and academics who study minority issues in China. This is very likely its actual purpose. Third, the law's attempt to privatize ideological enforcement by requiring families, internet platforms, and religious institutions to promote party ethnic policy creates inherent tensions with those institutions' own interests and may produce formal compliance that masks continued private dissent. The National Development Planning Law. China has not previously had formal statutory law governing the drafting, approval, and implementation of five-year plans. Developed over 7 decades, the planning process has operated under a mix of written authorities and long-standing customs. Since 1953, China has developed and implemented 14 five-year plans. The new law draws on that long-standing experience and aims to reinforce the strategic guiding role of national development plans. The law codifies the entire life cycle of a five-year plan, from drafting to legislative review and approval to implementation and evaluation. For every plan, the National Development and Reform Commission must draw up an implementing plan, and all levels and components of the bureaucracy must arrange their work in accordance with those documents. The legislation is designed to enhance coordination among various planning policies by strengthening top-level design and strategic alignment. Crucially, the law explicitly specifies the CCP's role at every stage. Party guidelines must be reflected when drafting the plan, and the State Council must obtain approval from the party's Central Committee before submitting the plan to the legislature for review. Problems with execution. The law's central tension is between its stated goal of bringing predictability and rule of law discipline to economic planning and its actual effect of further locking in party primacy. Several problems stand out. First, by legally enshrining the CCP's approval role at every stage of plan formulation, the law eliminates whatever residual technocratic space previously existed. The NDRC, which, despite being a powerful state organ, contains economists and planners capable of independent analysis, is now formally subordinated to party approval on the front end. This makes it harder, not easier, to adjust plans in response to market realities. Second, the law's provisions for plan adjustment require both State Council initiative and Party Central Committee approval, a cumbersome process that may slow response to rapidly changing conditions, as the structural tension between market mechanisms and state-led coordination becomes increasingly salient as China seeks innovation-driven growth while foreign investors face growing uncertainty. Third, the law's emphasis on binding all levels of government to plan targets replicates a well-known pathology of CCP governance, local officials manipulating statistics to appear compliant while pursuing different actual priorities. Legalizing the plan does not solve the compliance problem. It just changes the formal stakes without creating genuine accountability. Concluding thoughts. Taken together, the three new laws reflect a coherent political project that is of a piece with Xi's efforts to mold Chinese law and cement CCP control of China in perpetuity. The Environmental Code attempts to discipline economic actors in the service of the Beautiful China brand and genuine pollution concerns, but within a state apparatus that still cannot fully impose its will on provincial governments and state-owned enterprises. The Ethnic Unity Law converts decades of administrative assimilation policy into enforceable statute, ensuring that Xi's approach will outlast any single political moment, but at the cost of deepening resentment among the minorities it ostensibly serves. The Development Planning Law constitutionalizes the party's claim to steer the economy with legal force, which offers foreign investors a veneer of stability while actually narrowing the space for course correction. All three laws are better understood as instruments of institutional consolidation under Xi and the CCP than as genuinely reform-minded legislation. And the CCP's gain is the Chinese people's loss.